Welcome to Current Situation, your weekly political pulse. I'm your host, Joshua Gale, alongside South Carolina State House Representative Jordan Pace. Every week, our goal is to help you navigate the complex world of politics through a biblically conservative perspective. Before we jump into tonight's episode, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor.
Are you a veteran, medical professional, or first responder? Hi, I'm Travis Walthall, your trusted home loan chap, and at Premier Nationwide Lending, I specialize in serving heroes just like you. Whether you're protecting lives or healing patients, you deserve a home that reflects your dedication. As a VA loan expert and a specialist in medical professional financing, I'm here to provide your mortgage solutions. Contact me today to begin your journey. Premier Nationwide Lending. Visit us at loanslibrary.com/hello/Travis-Walthall. NMLS ID 1864838. Equal housing lender. Call for additional cost information. Other restrictions may apply.
In this episode, Jordan is going to update us on a lot of the things that have either passed the House, not passed the House, or in the Senate. A lot of the things that we've discussed over the past 16 episodes. Just to give you a recap, you heard it here first, and then a lot of people will say, hey, I just saw something pop up in so-and-so newspaper or so-and-so website. You know, what are your thoughts on this? Oh, yeah, we covered this weeks ago when it was actually in the House, when you could actually do something about it, when you could actually call your state representative and do something about what's being voted on. When you see it in the media, usually it's already being voted on in the House. It's already on its way somewhere else without, things that could be added or taken away before it goes on to the next step. And tonight we're going to cover something else called crossover, and Jordan's going to explain that part of it to us as well. So Jordan, good evening. I'm going to jump right in and just go ahead and ask you to clarify and tell us what crossover is, and about these things that when they pass the House, they have to go over to the Senate, and there's a time period, things like that. And then I'm going to begin to ask you about a lot of the different things that we've discussed here on the show.
Sure. So every year, there's this crossover date. This year was April 11th. So it changes slightly year to year. But after the crossover date, if a bill hasn't passed either the House or the Senate, then it has to receive a 2/3 vote of the receiving House to have it placed on its calendar. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So if the House hasn't passed it, even if we pass it after April 11th, the Senate would have to have a 2/3 vote to accept it from us, and vice versa. So effectively, if it hasn't passed by that crossover date, it's dead on arrival. It's not going to pass, barring some extreme circumstance.
Okay. To even get on the calendar.
Right. To be discussed.
Okay. To even be discussed. Okay. So the first one I want to discuss is the healthcare freedom. And we've talked a little bit about healthcare this year. We were mostly talking about S915, but there's also S975 that's at the Senate. S975 is a bill that would protect and advance medical freedom. And this would limit the power of the State Department of Public Health, require informed consent for department-provided vaccines during such emergencies as COVID-19, things like that. We put a lot of things in place that shouldn't have been, and it prohibits employers from discriminating against workers who decline a novel vaccine, like we saw at the North Charleston Police Department, which they're still in some lawsuits for firing police officers. We'll never get those police officers back because we only have one police academy in South Carolina. We don't pay as well. And when you can work at some other municipalities, you're not coming home. So tell us about S975 and where we're at there. And then let's jump into what we discussed on episode 10 in regards to S915.
Yeah, so S975 is a great bill that, again, started in the Senate, hence why it's S at the front instead of an H.
Correct.
It made it to the House floor, made it through all the committees, and it just never got the final vote in time before crossover. It literally got second reading, but not third reading, is my understanding, before crossover, and it had to get third reading for that to happen. So it's a real shame that it didn't pass, because it would have greatly rolled back a lot of the unnecessary and frankly tyrannical powers that are built into Title 44, which is the section of state code having to deal with DHAC, or the Department of Health, and particularly like medical emergencies. And like you said there at the end, it also would have protected individuals who did not want to get a novel medical intervention, whether it be a vaccine or mRNA injection or whatever, any kind of medical, I think the terminology there was a medical procedure in which the, basically where no one can get sued. So if something goes wrong and you can't sue the company that made it, then you shouldn't have to get it, and you can't be discriminated against by an employer for not getting it. And that's kind of the idea.
And that was, even in the federal government, that was a long time, I think in the 70s, put in there that, families couldn't sue for the vaccine providers for their children. And we're seeing that now. A lot of, we had a child just pass away because they were over-vaccinated while being under the weather, and the pediatrician told the family, just go for it, they'll be okay. And we've seen a lot of studies, sudden infant death syndrome, things like that, but you have nobody to blame, and is protected by law.
Yeah, and when they did that in the 80s, I think it was the Reagan administration that preempted lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers. But even when they did that, they did create the VAERS reporting system, and created a fund for compensation for those that are vaccine injured. In the case of like novel vaccines, such as we've seen in the last few years, like the COVID vaccines, there is no recourse at all because they were under the emergency authorization. So even if you were damaged by those, you can't tap into the VAERS or the vaccine damage fund. So this would at least protect people who didn't want to take that risk.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, it didn't make it through the Senate. It got very, very, very close. So we'll see. And regarding S915, we talked about, so S975, great bill. S915, terrible bill.
Right. And if you want to go back and listen, episode 10 is called Healthcare Hurdles, and Power plays a deep dive into South Carolina's healthcare reforms and a battle against concentrated power. Concentrated power is what we kind of leaned into a lot there.
Yeah.
Let us know about that one.
Yeah. So the House version of this was 74 pages long. Some that kind of became known in the zeitgeist, like out in the media, as the Health Czar bill. Some people called it. So the House version was 74 pages long. The Senate version was 144 pages long, so even bigger. And so that made it through crossover. Meanwhile, 975, the good bill, didn't. So they sent that over to us. It actually was in full committee today, Judiciary. They did amend it to be more closely aligned to the House bill. I have not finished reading that because I just got home like an hour ago, and it's several. I mean, it's like 100+ pages.
Wow.
So I'll be reading through that this evening once we're done. But the same idea is there in the Senate bill, which is concentrating all of those emergency powers that shouldn't exist, that 975 was trying to get rid of, concentrating all of those. So Department of Health, mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, and other and addictions, disability and special needs, all of those would go under one individual who would be appointed by the governor and approved of by the Senate to be in charge of all of those. And not only in charge of all of those agencies and having all of those powers and like emergency powers to command police and sheriffs, recommend breaking out the National Guard, things like that. They would also have the final approval over all regulations that these agencies promulgate and put out.
Right.
So before, usually the way that goes is the agency will come up with some regulation, it goes to their board, comes to the House and the Senate Regulations Committee. They approve or disapprove, and eventually come to the floor of the House and the Senate. Well, under this one individual would have all of the power over all of those regulations. And those regulations have a lot more to do on the ground for individuals and how they operate with the agency than even the laws do. Because this is the granular level of how these agencies operate. And so amongst many, many other things, it is just far too concentrated of power. We could accomplish a lot of the things that they claim they want to accomplish with this bill simply by having a more hands-on approach with these agencies and basically doing our job as legislators that we're apparently not doing, rather than create a new bureaucracy over these bureaucrats. So I'm hoping we're able to forestall 915 on the floor. We'll find out. But that's where we're at.
Yeah, definitely a lack of checks and balances there with 915. I also, got a lot of people in my life that are physicians, a lot of folks in my life with a master's of public health. There is, and I've had this conversation after episode 10, there is no program in the United States and in the world of a master of public health or any kind of medical degree that would give somebody that much knowledge, wisdom, and experience to be able to make all of those different decisions for the entire state. And so it needs to die. Going back to episode 6, we had a title, Guarding Innocence, the Civic Duty to Protect Children from Harm. And we discussed a bill that kind of got a nickname, Help Not Harm Bill. Where is that one at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that we passed that in the House right in January. I think it was the first bill through my committee that we actually passed. And it has been stuck in the Senate basically since January. It has passed the medical subcommittee and medical committee. It is on the calendar for the Senate, but the Senate has not moved it or put it on special order. And not to get too deep in the weeds on that, what does special order mean? Basically, the Senate has a very, very long calendar. The Senate can debate it forever. Like, they can just talk as long as they want to talk. Unlike the House, where we have some time limits. And so if a bill doesn't get on special order, then it has a very low likelihood of passing, even if it makes it on the calendar of the Senate. So that's really what we need, is for this bill to go on special order so it actually gets debated, because as of today, we only have 8 days left of session. We're done May 9th.
Is that a tactic? Usually some folks that don't want to discuss this, what would that be called? A stall? A filibuster?
A filibuster. Okay. Yeah. Either an active or a passive filibuster. And the Senate has some very, very arcane, old-timey rules that allow basically one senator to put their name on something, and it'll get skipped over until they kind of take their boot off of it, unless it's put on special order. So that's why it's so integral and necessary to put.
Special order can be done by the House, or it can be done by an individual.
No, by the Senate has to vote. I think it's 3/5 of the Senate. I'm a little rusty on those. Like I said, it's pretty arcane. It's either 3/5 or 2/3, but there's 3 slots, one of which is controlled by the Rules Committee. The other ones are controlled by other individuals. So it's even more complicated than I've laid it out.
And is this something that people can call their state senators and say, hey? Okay.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the bill number now. Yeah, if you're going to call, you can absolutely call your state senator and say, look, we want H 4624 to be put on special order, and we want you to pass it this year.
Okay. Sounds like everybody has something to consider to do there. If enough of us call, we're at a place where we're about over 200 weekly listeners. Guys, that's an easy phone call. And that's some pressure that we can put on our state representatives and state senators to be able to look at the things that we care about, and the things that, people are, passing over on purpose. And so, share with your friends. If there's enough attention brought to it, folks cannot help but give it attention.
And this is an election year, even for the Senate. Like, the whole Senate's up for re-election. This is a good time to call them.
And eventually we'll have some to hear from some of these people that are up for election. And I know where I live, signs are already going out. I saw signs for Sandy Sen, Matt Lieber, who are running against each other. We'll have a discussion with Matt Lieber, who's running against Sandy Sen. Sandy Sen is one of those people who likes to filibuster a lot of the great bills that we're trying to pass through the Senate. She is a progressive Republican. She is not a conservative Republican. She may not even be a Republican at all, but she is notorious for blocking things in the Senate.
Yeah. And I can tell you this, she has made very derogatory statements about the Help Not Harm bill, how it's totally unnecessary, and seems to be opposed to it. From everything I can tell.
Someone who's also been purchased by special interest as well. We won't get into it on this episode. Yeah. We'll have discussions with the folks that we're going to talk about different races here coming up in South Carolina. We talked about episode 7, Ballots, Bullets, Biblical Self-Defense, a deep dive into the constitutional carry, which is one of those things. We talked about it here first, and then, of course, you see everything about it in the news outlets. It passed and is signed, sealed, and delivered. Any comment on that?
Yep. Yeah, so that actually, after about a decade worth of work, passed. Both houses, governor signed it as of about a month ago. If you can legally buy a gun, then you can legally carry a gun in places that aren't restricted. So obviously not schools, banks, courthouses, polling places, handful of other locations you can't carry, but or anywhere that has like a private business that has that specific placard that says no concealed weapons. But outside of that, you can carry a small arm pistol.
All right. Episode 13, we discussed choice and challenge, unpacking the school choice bill's journey and impact. It has passed the House, not the Senate. What's the update there?
Yeah, so this has gone basically nowhere in the Senate, where last year we did pass a small pilot program, which we talked about in that episode. Try to expand it. It had some warts. It's not a perfect bill by any stretch of the imagination. The Senate has not moved at all on it. There's also a bill that the Senate had sent to us that has gone nowhere on the House side. They sent it to us last year, called the ACE bill. Sometimes it used to be called the PACE bill, which I like that term better personally. But this is basically a private donation scholarship fund that would allow companies or individuals to donate to a scholarship fund maintained by the Treasurer's Office, and then be distributed out as that 501c3 sees fit to families specifically for private school scholarships. And unfortunately, the House has not moved on that at all. So there's a little bit of back and forth, and I don't know if that's some kind of internal power play between the houses. I don't know, but unfortunately, neither one of those has moved.
And then we got into episode 14, Unity Beyond Diversity, Faith, Authority, and the DEI debate. Where's it at?
Yeah, so this is Bill 4289. This bill took literally a year or more of collaboration and working with a lot of different people on a lot of different sides. It doesn't ban DEI in universities, simply makes them report their DEI activities, and you can't discriminate against employees who refuse to take DEI training. So pretty simple. I thought fairly uncontroversial. Well, it passed the House and was referred to the Senate Education Committee back on April 2nd, but it has not received a subcommittee hearing yet in the Senate. So basically, if we go another week before it's heard, given a subcommittee hearing, then it's not going anywhere. So that's something. Another one.
There's a lot of work being done in the House, and if it was called, needed by the House, it should be given something by the Senate, at least a look. And so something again to call your state senators about to get something on the calendar here. And of course, you're going to read about it in the paper. You're going to see people whining and crying and making something up about it that it is not. And but it is something that I think that that we need so that we don't feel discriminated against when trying to find the best people for our colleges and universities based on experience and merit, and not a check in the box. Episode 15, Jordan, we talked about empowering South Carolina, the future of energy in South Carolina. Similar story here.
Yeah, so it's 5118. Again, this is another one of those giant bills. It was 80 pages long, went through several dozen different iterations through committees and changed on the floor several times. So it finally did pass the House, and it's gone to the Senate. It actually made it the calendar of the Senate, and I've talked to several senators who said this thing's dead on arrival. It's not going to special order. It's not going anywhere. I don't know. I think there might be some internal power play dynamics going on there between leadership in the House and the Senate. That's just kind of my speculation and my reading of the tea leaves. But it seems like that bill is not going to go anywhere this year either. The good news, somewhat good news about that is a lot of the things that bill is attempting to accomplish, we could accomplish with a bill that's not 80 pages long. And maybe if it doesn't pass this year, then we can try to accomplish that very quickly next year.
In episode 11, we talked about liability reform, unraveling insurance, the rising rates, regulations, and responsibilities. And we talked about in many states, if you cause someone harm, you pay your share of the damages, no more, no less. But not in South Carolina. Here, businesses and individuals can be forced to pay the entire legal verdicts despite only being partially at fault for an injury, a concept known as a joint and several liability. Where is this at?
Yep. So this is one of those that got very, very, very extremely close to making the crossover vote, but sadly did not. It actually even there was a floor amendment in the Senate that failed. I think it was 22 to 21. It was like one or two votes that kind of signaled to everybody, okay, well, this is going to get moving if they couldn't kind of poison pilled on the floor. It got second reading, just never got third reading by crossover. So sadly, that's not, that didn't make it over to the House. The House did pass a similar-ish bill that it really didn't touch joint severable liability at all. All the House bill does is gradually lower the liability insurance totals for these establishments if they meet certain criteria. So if they're a nonprofit, I think it goes down to $100,000. This is like the VFWs and American Legions, places like that. If they close between certain hours, that their staff get certain trainings, they can lower their liability that they have to have. It wouldn't solve the problem. It's very much a Band-Aid. If that, it might slow down the increase that we've seen. It certainly wouldn't hurt, but it's not the actual fix to the system. The Senate might be able to amend that and maybe fix it on their end if they so choose to do that in the next 7 or 8 days. But it seems pretty unlikely.
And that affects a lot of people who are trying to have restaurants and things like that. I saw it has. I saw Halls was just involved in one as one of the restaurants. I can't remember the other name of the other restaurant, but it affects things. It affects the cost of the food. It affects the staffing. All these different things and the places that we come to enjoy. Whether liable or not, things like that. It affects a lot of different places and insurance rates.
And just on a biblical level, like we have the multiple admonitions about equal weights and measurements, and how unequal weights and measurements are an abomination before the Lord. It is not, in my mind, fair and equal if someone's found 1% liable for them to pay 100% of the damages just because they had the bigger insurance policy. So the Senate bill could have done was said if you're 51% liable, then you pick up the damages. If you're less than 50% liable, then you pay what your liability, like your percentage of the liability, which is better. I mean, that's a much closer.
Absolutely.
To what it should be.
Let's jump in over here to the ease of work. Adopting policies that streamline regulations, facilitate ease of work, and empower entrepreneurs to thrive is a great approach to making South Carolina a more business-friendly state. And there are several bills that could accomplish just that. That's S1132. It exempts the following professional services from state licensing requirements. That's hair braiding, blow drying, and makeup artistry. That's your people for your hair and makeup for weddings and special events. And there's also H4580, which allows cosmetologists, estheticians, and nail technicians to provide services at a client's home or at an event venue, which is currently prohibited and except in cases of emergency.
Yeah. So these are both House bills. Sadly, neither one of them went anywhere. I'm a co-sponsor on at least one of them. Particularly on the hair braiding side, that wasn't even a regulated industry until a couple of years ago, which is completely insane that you have to get licensed to braid hair. This is stuff that girls were doing in the recess in my elementary school with each other. It's crazy. So neither of those have passed the House or the Senate, the House version or the Senate versions. My hope is that they'll come up early next year. And this is the crazy thing, these are bipartisan bills. The lead sponsor on the House version of the hair braiding bill is a Democrat, and I joined up on that because it's the right thing to do. So these are bipartisan bills. And
if you are a cosmetologist, you're a makeup artist, you're, a barber, all those different things. I mean, there's a very tight knit community out there because this is an essential thing, for, and how people make their living and all that kind of stuff. If you know those folks, have them reach out to their House representatives so that we can bring this back up and get this moving.
Yeah, and like you said, this is stuff that's already happening at wedding venues and even in people's homes, before they have weddings or events. We know this is happening, so why are we making criminals from these folks that are just trying to serve their neighbor? It's crazy.
Let's talk about judicial integrity. After years of struggling to get traction at the State House, South Carolina is closer than ever to passing changes that would improve how it selects judges and increasing public trust in our judicial system. We've spoken about this just a little bit, and we may dive into it more in a future episode. But tell us, Jordan, a little bit about the judicial integrity.
Yeah, so 1046, so 1046, it passed the Senate, surprisingly. I did not think that it would. So this bill is a restructuring of the JMSC, the Joint Merit Review Committee. This is the screening committee for judges in South Carolina from family court on through the Supreme Court. And for years, decades, this 10-member committee has controlled the judicial process of everything in the state. The crazy thing is that more than half of the members of this committee are lawyer legislators that argue in front of the judges that they effectively select. Just last week, we had the final judicial selection for the open seats last Wednesday, and one of the individuals that made it through screening was the former Democrat gubernatorial nominee, a guy named James Smith, who is a very nice man. He was a veteran, went and fought in Afghanistan. His record on that side is great. His politics are terrible. I mean, he is a far left, won tons of awards from Planned Parenthood, deeply involved in them, fine with transgender stuff for kids, is on the record saying that. And he made it out unopposed, essentially, through this crazy process that we have. Thankfully, we were able to put enough pressure, the grassroots put enough pressure on House leadership that they made this unprecedented motion to recommit him to the committee. Didn't even know we could do that. It's never been done in I don't know, a century that we know of. So that's good to see that grassroots pressure can work when it's focused and done the right way. But that kind of leaves the bigger point of we need reform in how we select judges. So the Senate bill has some good parts, some weak parts. Doesn't go nearly far enough, in my opinion. The House bill didn't make it through. They came up with something through this ad hoc committee. Again, it had some good, some bad. I don't know. I hope we pick it up. It has not gone through the House Judiciary Committee yet. It could come through as early as next week. It'll go through a subcommittee and then full committee before it makes it to the House floor. So that there is some movement there.
We definitely need reform here. You know, you have people like Chris Murphy, notorious for this, and we'll talk to his opponent, Greg Ford, sometime in the near future. Not only does Chris not show up to work and you know, going to rehab on taxpayer dollars, things like that, but was also, you know, trying to get friends and family at positions as
or not tried, successfully got friends or two family members on
to argue against
on the bench
friends.
as judges.
That's not we wonder why we have criminals back on the streets, and we have people getting away with certain things that they should not get away with, and it's because in South Carolina we have a terrible process of choosing our judges. So we'll speak to Greg Ford a little bit about that in the future. But you know, we need folks like that out of office that are abusing power. We don't need this same process that's broken and not working for the taxpayers and the citizens of South Carolina. Let's talk a little bit, one or two more things here. We're talking about government transparency. And we talked about this a little bit, and obviously we could dive into this a lot more, but we'll keep it brief. In the digital age, there's no shortage of ways to make government more transparent and accessible to the public. I think every politician that's ever ran for office, whether in city government, state government, anything, has always said, I want to be more transparent. I want to let you know more about what's going on. And we had the ability to do this. In the case of South Carolina, we have at least two legislative proposals that need more attention. Can you speak into that?
Sure. So if we go look at the Bible, the Levitical law, and this is best exemplified with the trial of Jesus, or the false trial, where the Pharisees and Sadducees broke all their own laws regarding how trials and how government operations are supposed to happen. The Sanhedrin is supposed to meet in the daytime. Any trials are supposed to be, again, in the daytime and open to the public for people to come and see. Basically, the idea there is transparency. And this goes all the way back to like Moses appointing judges on the advice of his father-in-law. When the elders and judges would sit, it would be in public, in the daytime, in the sunlight, not in back rooms and not where people couldn't pay attention and see it. So these two bills, unfortunately, didn't go anywhere. My friend Rob Harris put together a pretty compelling bill, I thought. I joined on to it, the Government Transparency Act. This will require all government meetings, from every House and Senate meeting to all the way down to local boards and committees, to live stream and then archive in some form the meetings that they had. This is very, very easy to do. If someone has a smartphone, they can do this. It doesn't require it to be high quality or meet any of those kind of parameters. It just says, look, you need to record it, you need to make it available to the public. Stream it, archive it. A lot of times we already do this with House committees, not all of them. There's some that aren't streamed and aren't archived like that. But the Senate doesn't do all this the best. I think one of the finance subcommittees a couple weeks ago, there was no live stream of that.
Wow.
And this is talking about the budget. I'm not surprised that they didn't move, but I'm hoping that Rob comes back next year and that he brings it back. And
Awesome. All right. I have one more thing.
we'll try to push it again.
And obviously, we don't get a ton of time to do any pre-production for this because we have families and we're extremely busy and we're committed to what we're doing and everything that we do for the Lord. But I want to bring up one more thing real quick. There is a gentleman in the that currently represents Taylor's on the east side of Greenville in South Carolina in District 20, and his name's Adam Morgan. And he's currently running to represent South Carolina for Congress in District 4. Adam is running against Timmons, who had tons of family money, lots of corruption there, and there's just so much coming out of that we will see in the coming days. If you're not paying any attention, look at that. It's literally grassroots versus family money and tons of corruption. But Adam, why I bring this up, I think was pointing to a way to look at that 1.8 billion that we found, and Adam was proposing something with that. Where do we stand with that 1.8 billion?
Yeah, Adam and I talked about this basically as soon as we found out about that 1.8 billion. Is all right. Well, we need to get that back to the people, assuming we can distribute it back to the people. That it's South Carolina tax money and not federal money. Then we need to give it back. And so he had the bill written up. I was first or second co-sponsor on the bill to do exactly that. It's pretty simple. It's about half a page long. It says, if this is South Carolina taxpayer money and we can appropriate it, then we're going to appropriate it by sending it back to the people. It's not going anywhere. It didn't make crossover, which realistically that's okay because we're not going to know for sure about that 1.8 billion probably until next year's budget. The governor has put together a commission with the Department of Administration, Treasurer's Office, the Auditor's Office, and the Comptroller General's Office to coordinate together. All of them have been given additional funds in the budget to hire more staff, and then an outside auditor is also looking into this to figure out where that money was originally supposed to go, where it came from, and what we can do with it. So assuming that we're legally allowed to distribute it back, which is the assumption that we're under is that it is South Carolina taxpayer money that was accumulated over time from 2017 when they shifted accounting software to the new accounting software, that it was supposed to go to agencies or what have you that apparently didn't need it because they haven't missed it. And if that's the case,
Right.
people could use it.
I know what exactly when that comes around next year. I know exactly what you can call and tell we're not going to call JG Wentworth. We're going to call your state representatives and we're going to say it's my money and I need it now.
No. Right.
And so
that's right. It's your money and you need it now. No. I don't think inflation is going away anytime soon. It seems to be ticking up, back up. For the last couple quarters, so more than ever.
And if you're not paying attention to some of these, we're going to begin to bring more attention to these. There's again all House and Senate up for re-election. We have a major election coming up on June 11th. Jordan and I are going to try to talk to as many folks as we can between now and then, and to kind of expose some things. But there's a lot at stake at the House and the Senate over the next 2 to 4 years that we can accomplish if we all pay attention to what's at stake right now and make it to the polls on June 11th to make the right decision. And we're going to do that. But if you're not paying attention, if you're up in that east side of Greenville and the Taylors area of South Carolina and you're in Spartanburg area, yes, and that's District 4.
Yeah, most of Spartanburg County.
You can visit voteadammorgan.com. Again, we're talking about Greg Ford. We're talking about Matt Lieber. We're going to talk about some other folks in South Carolina that we want you to pay attention to. There's some folks that we need out and that we need fresh blood. We need some folks that are filibustering and they're blocking things, and they've already been purchased, they've already been corrupted. We need them out, and we're going to try to provide as much information as possible. At least I am, on my opinion of who's running for what, and what we need as conservative Christians in the state of South Carolina. So again, thank you for tuning in to Current Situation Podcast. We look forward to sharing that information with you in the coming weeks. Again, if you have any questions about these things, please don't hesitate to reach out, currentsituationpodcast.com. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and we will see you next week.